As prayers marked the end of Ramadan in Syria, thousands of anti-government protesters poured onto the streets and the security forces were ready for them. 7 activists are reported to have been killed, 3 shot dead today. It's inevitable, perhaps, that as some sort of victory is reached by the rebels of Libya, hope and a certain amount of pressure will have passed over the Arab world to Damascus. Western governments will be relieved that things worked out as they did so far in Libya. But what lesson has this intervention taught us? And where does it leave us for next time round? Does it offer any lessons at all for Syria? Our diplomatic editor, Mark Urban, reports.
Nobody's quite clear which route Libya's revolution will follow now, but plenty of French and British pundits have been quick to declare that this was a model way to get rid of a dictator. So if it can be done in Libya, why not Syria? Today's religious festival of Eid has given way to further protest and a bloody Syrian response.
Syria is a linchpin of the Middle East. If Syria goes up in smoke, then immediately you've got problems in Lebanon. You've got problems at the border between Israel and Syria, which has been quiet since 1973, one of the quietest borders around. So, all in all, we have picked a big problem, which was Libya, but in the context of the Middle East, it was not the fundamental problem.
Gaddafi had made himself pretty much a friendless dictator. The intervention against him was preceded by an Arab League vote and followed by one in the UN Security Council. Neither body would be ready to vote for similar action against Libya.
We have seen how a UN resolution was rushed to secure a military intervention in Libya. And the Arab League, which initially supported the UN resolution, was very quick to distance itself from the decision, given the turn that the military action was in Libya.
It's true the Turks, concerned about their border with Syria, have changed their language towards the Assad government, and so have the Russians. But many Arab countries are playing a waiting game, and the Syrian regime still has fulsome support from Iran.
We've seen some of the Arab states, such as Saudi Arabia, have withdrawn their diplomatic representatives from Syria, but yet he still has some very major allies that Libya did not. Assad and Syria are not as diplomatically isolated as Gaddafi was in Libya. Syria has very close relations with Iran, very involved in Lebanon, and also with Hezbollah. So these are much more stronger and direct allies than Gaddafi had in Libya.
The Syrian-Iranian alliance, supporting groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon or Hamas in Gaza, raises other problems for those who seek a change of government in Damascus. President Assad has a doomsday option of triggering a regional war with Israel as a means of trying to divert dissent.
To a large extent, that is the ultimate and the most desperate card of Bashar al-Assad that he could play. Clearly, he could play that card in collapsing the regime in Lebanon, which is a very rickety coalition depending on Syria's goodwill. Clearly, he could try to encourage the Hamas movement in Gaza to restart its missile offensive on Israel. And there were some tentative attempts to get marches, supposedly spontaneous marches, on the border between Syria and Israel in order to rekindle the dispute on the Golan Heights.
And if the diplomatic obstacles to acting against Syria could be overcome, his security forces are a mightier foe than those of Libya. The Syrians are better equipped and organised. Bashar al-Assad remains the only successful Republican dynast in the region, having succeeded his father in part through careful cultivation of the forces.
There is no doubt that although Syria is run by effectively a minority of Alawites, the power structure and its reliance on the army is crucial, and it's proved much more loyal to the regime than in the case of Libya.
The strength of Syrian defences means that an air campaign would require a big American effort to overwhelm them at its start. As it stands today, the idea of US airstrikes, enabling UN resolutions, or even trade isolation all seem remote, and the Assad government sits secure in power.